So in that sense, is it replacing humans? Well, it is doing some of the works that humans did once upon a time. But we need to get there. And I think that getting there is quite an endeavor, right? 2% of the population in America and the UK works in a contact center, right? That's a lot of people, right? And we don't have capabilities that are like plug in an Ethernet cable and here's your AI doing the work.
Hello, and welcome to another episode of the Deep Learning with PolyAI podcast, the only podcast recording on this, the first day of the Northern Hemisphere summer. Happy summer to you, Nikola. How are you?
Happy summer. I mean, it is boiling in London, so I missed the calendar day, but yeah, it's hot.
Well, as a native Floridian, I always know when the first day of summer comes around because this is when everybody in my home state would basically hovel into a air-conditioned room and not leave for 3.5 months. But this could be a podcast that you're listening to with your windows down on your morning commute. So, happy summer to you. There's been a lot of stuff going on in the news, Nikola, and I just wanted to dive into a topic that seems to be bubbling up in quite a few little publications, press releases, and whatnot. We know what happened with Klarna, very obviously going to market and saying that they were going to automate as much as possible and reduce a lot of their human workforce, especially in customer service. That backfired a little bit. Recently, they've walked that back. They're starting to rehire to bring in a more human AI, human machine hybrid work environment. Recently, Gartner just published a press release. Your co-founder or CTO, Sean Wen, posted on LinkedIn about how Gartner is saying now by 2027, 50% of organizations that replaced human capital in customer support functions, specifically in contact center, are probably going to be hiring back this year because they went a little too whole hog on AI implementations, thinking it was going to be a magic bullet and therefore reduced staff count too much. So let's talk about that elephant in the room. And I know that we've had a longstanding opinion on the idea of AI as replacing people, but it isn't. It's actually evolving into a partnership. It's enhancing agent capabilities, improving overall customer service. Well, again, we've been saying this for years. Gartner's saying it's a key trend for 2025. Let's just talk about this. How do you see the current state of capabilities in conversational AI being an augmenting factor as opposed to strictly automation, specifically in customer service? And, what sort of problem is this overall?
So look, I think there are a few things to talk about there. One is we're always trying to kind of like really rush this thing to completion and say, okay, AI jumped in. Capabilities is going to automate everyone this year. Well, how? It needs to find its way into the market. It needs to get implemented. And a lot of processes of big companies that do a lot of work with a lot of people needs to change in a meaningful way, right? So as AI improves and we implement better systems for enterprises, it will do some of the work that humans do now, no doubt, right? So in that sense, is it replacing humans? Well, it is doing some of the works that humans did once upon a time. But we need to get there. And I think that getting there is quite an endeavor, right? 2% of the population in America and the UK works in a contact center, right? That's a lot of people, right? And we don't have capabilities that are like plug in an Ethernet cable and here's your AI doing the work on behalf of your company. Now, if AI is everything that people make it out to be today, and I just want to make it clear that I am absolutely in that camp, and I think that's...
Of course.
No, it's much more powerful than people really mostly appreciate, understand, and it will only play out in the next few years, right? But it takes kind of like wiring it up and connecting it all up in a meaningful way, right? To turn the workflow, let's say the work of 5%, 10%, 20% of your contact center into an AI agent doing that work on their behalf, whether it's by talking to people on the phone or chatting or doing backend tasks like moving files around, doing data entry into different systems, right? That's all like something that you have to plan and implement, right? So I think those that would like you to think that they a priori, remove people because they believe the AI would make up for it, I think that's a bit wishful. I think that for the most part, what I've seen is that contact centers either struggle to hire or they struggle to hire even more, right? Like it's never easy, right? So it might just be that they hope that they realize some efficiencies. For the most part, that AI that they're referring to is a warning message telling people we have long waiting times, please go and you can do this online and you could do that online.
Right.
You know, that really is a question of just how are you willing, well, how far are you willing to go in trading off your CSAT scores for OpEx reductions? Because if you really can do, say, half of the things that people are calling about online, but they persevere in calling, you have an option, which is to never service those categories of calls. You might churn some customers from your service, say you're a broadband provider or, you know, uh, utility company. Well, that depends on whether it's a monopoly or not in a given state. But if you do that, you will frustrate a lot of your callers, right? And over time, there will be a new steady state where some will move online and some will move to other providers, right?
Well, I mean, that's
And
that's giving whispers of the advent of like offshore business process outsourcing and whatnot. That was the entire catalyst for that, right? What are we willing to trade off to reduce OpEx? And by no means should AI earn the reputation that early stage offshore business process outsourcing came in, because it was a completely off-brand experience largely, and it was seriously frustrating to customers.
no, but listen, I mean, much like there are incredible offshore contact centers that are
Yeah,
really, really good, right? And those that are not, there are really good instances of AI being implemented to do incredible work, and instances of places where it's been completely,
exactly.
like where it's a failed attempt, right? So that's okay. That's not controversial. That will happen, and it will give AI a bad name and a good name, and over time we got to make it better, and technology will improve. So over time, we'll arrive at a better steady state, right? Now, I
Right.
think like more locally, prescient is this question. Like, what do you automate in a contact center, right? And I've long thought of like how to express it to different audiences. And in a very businessy framing, it's really just a matter of trading off CapEx with OpEx. And what I mean by that is, let's say that that you're a bank, right? Will you build out a system that allows me, like an AI vendor, to integrate with you so that I can recognize Damien Smith, who lives in this city, this state, etc. Right? Am I happy if you use your mother's maiden name and then two-factor authentication? First, the CapEx is I got to pay people to scope this whole thing out, have a project proposal, then I need to get it approved by InfoSec. Then my IT teams or partners' IT teams working with me have to build all that plumbing for the AI system to connect to so that
Right.
it can be a class citizen inside the contact center, right? Now, the second gate there is either customers are willing to engage or not. And it's never binary. They are willing to some extent. Some are very willing, some are less willing, and there's just
Sure.
kind of like a continuum, right? So it's up to you around like how far you're going to do what we call harsh containment around pushing people to use it at all costs versus, say, the second time they ask for a human, you might just cave in and give them a human, right? So you'll navigate that adoption curve somehow. But really, at the end of it, you will have put in resources into the implementation of the AI system. There will be continuous OpEx from using the AI models, right? And then there will be just the the upfront investment and the continuous investment into the plumbing around the AI agent to do all that, right? Now, if you're building an AI agent that's going to take a few million calls of a particular type a year, and you're reasonably confident that it will do a great proportion of them well, then that might be a very, very good investment, right? But if you set out to automate an infrequent call type, and then you start building into your old esoteric KPIs that you don't really know that well, and then you encounter one issue and another and another, and then the whole project gets delayed, the total investment into human labor and other kind of like resources into the whole thing expands, then maybe it ends up being something with a very long payback period, right? Where you shouldn't have automated, right? And that's a question that we've been navigating for years with our enterprise clients, right? We have quite a few systems that now do the work of 1,000 people. And let me tell you, some were easier than others. None were
Right.
particularly easy at the very start when people didn't believe this was possible. But at this point, some of them have scaled up to that level of usage in a matter of 6 to 9 months, right? They start and, in month 1 or 2, 3, we end up doing the equivalent work to a few hundred people. And, 6, 9, 12 months later, we're doing the work of 1,000. Some took longer, right? And it really depends on just the organization's standpoint ability to kind of like align this giant Gantt chart, their work and our work and everyone's work to kind of like drive it to that successful completion, right? And I didn't really used to think much about project management as a discipline. But as we started doing this with some of the world's largest enterprises, I've realized that it's like one of the most important things in AI, right?
Yeah.
Because your models could be great. They could be the best in the world. They could be getting better, and they probably are, right?
But if they're
Even
not
if
being utilized correctly, they're not being in the right application, then
it's also just like, what do you do with them, right? It's like no
yeah,
one doubt an Ethernet cable, right? But whether you build a website that people want to use or not is not the internet's fault. It is
right.
your fault as the designer of the website and as a company behind it with a product to offer, right? So
Well,
a lot
you mentioned a little bit about how the companies we're working with are sort of abandoning those esoteric KPIs and looking at new ways to sort of establish value and understand where we should put our automation efforts, right? Not just we need to automate, let's go carte blanche, but where would this be most effectively used? You said sometimes it takes 6 to 9 months. Other people recognize it early. In the variety of organizations that we work with who are recognizing this value and doing it quickly, and by taking a new approach to project management and assessing those KPIs, are there any that stand out as being sort of new or emerging within the space that are sort of counterintuitive to the historic, all right, measure CSAT, measure average handle time, blah, blah, blah? Is there anything that's popping out to really kind of show a better correlative value early on as far as KPIs are concerned? Maybe even qualitative if we don't want to go quantitative.
Yeah, I mean, look, I think that qualitatively, the call type that you should go after that will be the highest value to automate are calls that are high importance to customers, but intrinsically lower value to the company itself, right? Because they might be something that doesn't make them money, but it's part of them providing that service, right? And it might be like very, very high volume, right? It might be people, think like order tracking, returns, stuff like that,
Sure.
where some giving the goods really cares about them, but they've already paid, right? And it's a cynical take on it, but you always follow the money and you find out just kind of like any issues related to taking a payment, and kind of like booking that initial deal or selling the product, that tends to be done really, really well. There's a reason we have like one-click buy for almost everything through 4 different services.
Right.
Past that one-click buy, once you start doing order tracking and other things, it tends to be a bit more difficult and maybe just historically a bit less invested in, which is why these are calls that end up being potentially very complicated for people and to navigate both in the contact center and by the caller, the consumer themselves. And for those calls, some you can automate really well. For others, you might not be able to, but then really the equation gets modulated by like how many of them are there and like what's the price of automating, right? And to do that, you just really have to know what tends to work. And you also, depending on the kind of like profile of the contact center, you'll know what to go after and just how ambitious to be in terms of directing people into an automated channel. Because, if you've got a really well-staffed contact center and a high CSAT, you probably don't have a problem. And in that case, we really shine because we do very soft containment where at the first sign of trouble or frustration, we'll hand you off to the human contact center. And the discrepancy between the resolution, so what percentage of people feel that they spoke to AI that solved their problem, and containment, people who didn't get to speak to a human,
Right.
the more narrow that gap is, right? The closer you are to a system that is not net neutral, but actually positive to both customer experience and the operating expenses of the enterprise, right? Now, if you've got a contact center that does not have enough people, then you're in luck. Well, you're not in luck. You have a problem, right? But a problem, you call the doctor. We come in and we say, let's automate half the calls. Those calls will now be cheaper than those handled by humans.
Sure.
And people speak to you sooner. And we'll do a really good job in those calls so that the other half that maybe we haven't automated are now not waiting instead of waiting for, 10 minutes, right? So the experience for both groups of customers improves because no one's waiting, right? And, if you really ensure that you automated the call types that you can automate well, then you just become a better company at much lower cost. And the more AI improves, the more of this you'll be able to do, but it will still take and build the careers of many of the executives, the kind of people that we work with, where, they're the ones turning this contact center into that command center of the future where they're building the capabilities to go into these different fields of work that they do and to really wrap AI around them. Because that's what we do. And that's what our kind of like counterparts that by PolyAI do inside their companies.
When you talk about that command center vision of the future, and we've touched on both at events and talking opportunities, as well as on the podcast before, I think at least partially about the future of the contact center, highly distributed, not a big central room. Pretty much there could be a complete disillusion, but the idea of a centralized contact department versus a more nebulous structure, what does that command center look like in the future? And is that really where we might see the true offsetting of necessity of human agent interaction?
No, look, I don't think that building the command center means that you have a distributed contact center.
Okay.
You might have a distributed contact center, or it might be centralized. That's, I think, an orthogonal question, right? I think what matters much more is just the ability to do much of the work with automated AI systems that feed that information back in the best way possible instantly into that central cortex that is the enterprise, right?
Right.
And it's not just customer service where this will happen. This AI agentification is happening throughout the enterprise, right?
Yeah.
And what better place to agentify it than in the department where you have the most agents, right? Now you have so many and you're doing so much in the contact center with high attrition that you will still have, if you now have thousands, I guarantee you'll probably still, if you have 10,000 people in the contact center, even in 5 years time, you'll probably have at least 1,000, right? So, and that's still like a chunky organization, right? That those 1,000 people will all be paid a lot more and their jobs will be way more interesting because they are the co-pilots and, the kind of like the officers of that company going to the future, because it is the central ops department, right? Customer experience, where, the downstream effects of operational decisions made upstream, and then like the impact to the customers at scale makes them, if they have the right kind of like AI agent capabilities, they're basically the best outlet for a marketing department that could exist, right?
Right.
So the best collectors of signal that you could ever have, right? So I think
aggregate customer data, potential upsell opportunities, the concept of personalized marketing begins in the contact center.
It all converges, right?
Yeah.
Companies become smaller, but far more effective and far more powerful, nimble, agile. And I think, a lot of people then think, well, doesn't that mean that these companies will increase their profits and be even bigger while being, kind of like smaller, nimbler, and what are the rest of the people who are no longer there going to do, right? The truth is, in a world accelerating as fast as we are, we're all working like 16 hours a day, right? And it's never been more exciting. And part of the reason for that is that there is so much going on and so many people are doing new things, right? So I think humanity, rather than seeing disillusionment by this new world where like, there's intellect that is not just human that we work with, I actually just see humans enticed and challenged and absorbed into an effort that is even more fulfilling, right? Because that same company, no matter how good it is an old company transforming itself, trying to fight an onslaught of incoming new companies that have, with AI, built up capabilities ground up with AI that these guys never even had, right?
Right.
So therein you will have a collision between your Walmarts and your Amazons, right? And, we'll see who wins, I think. At the end of the day, the inherent structural advantages of very large players are usually sufficient for them to, remain very, very important. But new ones will emerge, right? And then in the next generation, they will both be bold companies and they'll continue to reinvent themselves or to get eaten by this capitalist endeavor. So,
well, according to Idiocracy, the winner is Costco. According to Demolition Man, the winner of the restaurant wars is Taco Bell. So either way, I think a bleak future in that future, maybe, but we'll see what happens with the rest of the organizations.
So you feel that. I don't know how you feel about this, but I feel like global food has just continued to improve massively, right? I mean, when I don't think I had sushi until I moved to the UK, right? And when I go back to Belgrade right now, honestly, like
sushi on every corner.
It's not every corner, but it's serious, right?
Yeah.
So I think the proliferation of, everyone's like, oh, we don't like chains. Well, if a really good sushi chain springs up around Europe, that means that Europeans get to eat sushi, right? So, and
And
then,
that's a logistics problem. That's the logistics problem that they're solving is how to get sushi to Belgrade.
that's
Yeah.
always, yeah, that's always interesting. But, I think you look at just like the proliferation of all of it, and then you look at your New York and London, and, there's someone banging their head around how to innovate further and create,
Right.
the new wave of Pokeballs or whatever, right? So I think that will happen with all of these large enterprises as well, right? There will just be sustained innovation and corporate activity that will create a world that we won't be able to recognize 5 years from now. Well, 10, 5, I don't know. Anyone's guess.
Well, when you said the 10 years, you also said like, look, if you had a contact center of 10,000, it's probably still going to be 1,000 10 years from now or 5 years from now. Those 1,000, we talked about this a little bit historically, the reskilling of those 1,000, are those going to be people who still are fundamentally contact center operatives, agents at heart, or are they coming from other parts of the business to now run that function? If the former, what sort of skills are they adopting to keep up with the Joneses for that organization in the future?
So, I mean, there's always movement inside companies, and these functions that are like kind of like growing closer together as you integrate everything. We'll definitely have people who mix in, but for the most part, it is the business, it is the contact center agents, their managers, coaches, QA people who will get to take on the mantle of now managing this, AI behemoth that interacts with most of their consumers. So they will be the ones that form the vast majority of that 1,000 people, right?
Yeah.
I think that, IT has a really important role to play, but, what we have seen previously and continue to see is that it's not just of the IT. It's not like IT comes in and builds something and now like the contact center is no more. It is the contact center that has to reinvent itself into the command center. And it can only really do that when companies like Poly come in and create the technology for them to do that, right?
Yeah.
We do it hand in hand with them because, well, frankly, it's the only way. Like we've tried just giving technology to people and, we think it's great, but then, those people don't live the daily struggles of a contact center, and hence they can't affect meaningful change in the contact center either.
That's true. Some may say that for those who oversee those day-to-day operations within the contact center that these assertions by Gartner, these moves by Klarna are indicative, at least in the short term, on a boon to things like agent assist and using AI tools to help out human agents. Do you think that that's the case, or are we still looking at a potential track in the short term of operating in tandem and not necessarily hand in hand?
Listen, agent assist, that's like Henry Ford's famous, if you ask people what they wanted, they would have told you they want faster horses, right?
Faster horses, right?
And try to optimize this. And, a lot of agent assist is built to, it's really not solving the root cause, which is, like the need to service that thing at scale. And it's really about like ramping an agent that might have joined yesterday to be at least okay, because they're going to quit 6 months later anyway, right?
Sure.
That's a cynical way to fix it. And of course it can help. And there are parts of the agent assist stack that are very useful, like call summarization and all that. And, the agent will still be there. So where you can build like robust assistive tools that make their lives better, you absolutely should.
Right.
But I think, and we always kind of like invite our prospects to think about it. If in a world where you have 10,000 agents, you imagine a world in which you have 1,000 agents, right? Making those 1,000 agents 10, 20% more effective becomes a lot less important than getting to, a world where 90% of your work is done by an AI hive mind that is far more powerful and capable of both servicing your customers and helping the organization figure out what's actually happening with your customers at that scale. So, one carries with it an infinitely bigger price than the other, and you should prioritize it. Most companies do, not all of them do. I think that a lot of CCaaS vendors really like Agent Assist as a way for companies to tick the AI box. Like we've done AI,
Right.
we've AI from our CCaaS vendor. And, I think you have to follow the money, right? The CCaaS vendor gets paid on the number of seats you have, right?
Correct.
So they will defend that seat count at all costs. And if you, it's like turkeys voting for Christmas, right? But you believe them that they will automate half of their revenue away for the benefit of your organization, well, you're a better person than I am.
Okay. On turkeys voting for Christmas. I think that's a good outro. Hey, I really appreciate your time today, Nikola. This was an enlightening conversation as usual. Any last thoughts on this, or are we going to end with turkeys?
Oh, let's end with turkeys. It was good to see
Sounds
you,
good to
Damien.
me. Sounds good. All right. Talk to you soon. Thank you so much.